Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise de Lamballe was born into a world of privilege, refinement, and expectation in 1749. Her family, the House of Lamballe, was one of the most respected and influential noble families in France. From an early age, she was groomed to occupy a position of prominence within the French aristocracy. Her upbringing was meticulously structured. She was educated in the classical subjects expected of young noblewomen: languages, history, literature, etiquette, and music. But she was also trained in the subtler arts of courtly diplomacy. In essence, she was being prepared not only to live among the elite, but to navigate the delicate social currents of Versailles with grace, intelligence, and discretion. Marie-Thérèse was known for her exceptional beauty, which was often described as both striking and delicate. She possessed the pale complexion, finely sculpted features, and elegant bearing that made her a quintessential French aristocrat. However, it was not merely her appearance that set her apart. Contemporaries often remarked on her intelligence, charm, and poise. Unlike some of her peers, who relied solely on wealth and status, Princess de Lamballe combined her noble lineage with an innate understanding of human nature. She was capable of reading moods, mediating disputes, and offering counsel, all skills that would later make her indispensable to the Queen herself. Her life took a pivotal turn when she became acquainted with Marie Antoinette, the young Austrian archduchess who had arrived in France to marry the Dauphin, the future King Louis XVI. The bond between the two women formed quickly, built on a shared sense of isolation and the pressures of court life. Marie Antoinette, though adored by the royal family, often felt alien in the rigid and scrutinizing world of Versailles. She found in Marie-Thérèse not just companionship, but understanding and loyalty. Over time, Princess de Lamballe became more than a friend. She was a confidant, a protector, and a trusted advisor to the Queen. By the time Marie Antoinette ascended to her role as Queen in 1774, de Lamballe had already secured a significant place in the royal household. She was appointed superintendent of the Queen's household, a role that combined administrative oversight with personal service. In this position, she managed the Queen's staff, coordinated her schedule, and often acted as the intermediary between the Queen and the court. Her duties went beyond mere management. She became the Queen's sounding board, offering candid advice and emotional support at a time when Marie Antoinette faced constant scrutiny and criticism. Their relationship was emblematic of an era when the personal and political were inseparable. Princess de Lamballe's influence on Marie Antoinette was profound. She helped the Queen navigate the labyrinthine intrigues of Versailles, advised her on matters of etiquette and diplomacy, and provided a buffer against the relentless gossip that surrounded the royal family. In many ways, de Lamballe served as the Queen's shield, absorbing much of the court's criticism while maintaining an unwavering loyalty that would ultimately define her tragic legacy. Yet, this close association with the Queen, which had been a source of strength and influence, would later become the cause of her downfall. In the volatile years leading up to the French Revolution, loyalty to the monarchy was increasingly viewed with suspicion. The aristocracy, once untouchable, became a symbol of oppression to the revolutionary populace. For Princess de Lamballe, her dedication to Marie Antoinette was both a badge of honor and a target on her back. She remained steadfast, refusing to abandon the Queen, even as whispers of unrest grew louder in the streets of Paris. Despite the looming threat, de Lamballe's character was defined by courage, compassion, and an unshakable sense of duty. She was deeply religious, which informed both her moral compass and her approach to service. She often acted as a mediator in conflicts within the court, promoting fairness and temperance, and was known for her charitable acts toward those less fortunate. While her wealth and status provided comfort, she was not detached from the suffering of others. This humanity, however, was not enough to protect her from the wrath of a society consumed by revolutionary fervor. Her social and political awareness was nuanced, but she was perhaps naive in underestimating the speed and ferocity with which the revolutionary tide would sweep through France. Even as radical pamphlets vilified the monarchy and painted its close associates as enemies of the people, de Lamballe remained loyal to her principles and to the Queen. She viewed her service not as a political statement, but as a moral obligation. This steadfastness, while admirable, ultimately placed her in the crosshairs of revolutionary justice. Marie-Thérèse's life, up to this point, had been a careful balancing act between privilege and responsibility. She was acutely aware of the court's rigid hierarchies, the importance of reputation, and the dangers of misstep. Yet, she was also guided by a personal code of loyalty and honor that transcended mere self-preservation. This combination of elegance, intellect, and unwavering devotion made her beloved to the Queen and respected by many. But it also meant that when the revolution sought to make examples of the royal inner circle, she could not and would not distinguish herself from the monarchy she served. In the eyes of the revolutionary forces, Princess de Lamballe embodied everything they despised: loyalty to a monarch, aristocratic privilege, and proximity to the Queen, who had become the symbol of royal decadence and detachment from the struggles of ordinary citizens. Yet, those who truly knew her understood a different truth. De Lamballe was not a scheming courtier or a frivolous noblewoman. She was a woman of intelligence, integrity, and deep humanity. She devoted her life to service, friendship, and the ideals of personal loyalty, qualities that would become tragically irrelevant in the chaos of revolutionary Paris. By the late 1780s, the world around her had begun to unravel. The monarchy's power was waning, revolutionary sentiment was swelling, and the courtly life that had shaped her identity was collapsing. For Princess de Lamballe, the coming storm was not simply a political upheaval, it was a personal one. Her very identity, tied as it was to Marie Antoinette and the royal household, placed her in mortal danger. Yet she faced these threats with remarkable composure, believing that duty and courage could protect both herself and the Queen. It was this mixture of loyalty, intelligence, and personal grace that would define her final years, and, tragically, set the stage for one of the most horrifying episodes of the French Revolution. Princess de Lamballe's life before the Revolution's bloodshed was one of refinement, influence, and quiet heroism. She was a figure who navigated the dangerous waters of court politics with elegance, providing counsel, comfort, and loyalty to the Queen at every turn. Her story is a stark reminder that, in times of upheaval, even the most intelligent and devoted individuals can find themselves powerless against the tides of history. In her steadfast service, de Lamballe became more than a courtier. She became a symbol of loyalty, courage, and ultimately the human cost of revolutionary fervor. By the late 1780s, France was a nation teetering on the edge of chaos. The seeds of revolution had long been sown, but their growth had been gradual, nurtured by decades of inequality, mismanagement, and resentment. The monarchy, once revered, had become a symbol of excessive privilege, detachment, and indulgence, particularly under King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. Meanwhile, the common people, burdened by oppressive taxation, rising food prices, and a lack of political representation, simmered with frustration. It was in this climate of tension, discontent, and social upheaval that the fate of Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise de Lamballe, and indeed the entire French aristocracy, would be sealed. The revolution did not erupt overnight. It was the culmination of years of economic crisis, political ineptitude, and cultural resentment. France's financial state had deteriorated after costly wars, including the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution. The monarchy's lavish spending and continued reliance on outdated feudal taxation systems left the state bankrupt. Meanwhile, Enlightenment ideas spread rapidly among the educated classes, promoting ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The contrast between the philosophical notions of justice and the stark reality of everyday suffering created a volatile environment. Aristocrats like Princess de Lamballe, who had been untouchable, suddenly became symbols of oppression and targets for public outrage. The political climate intensified in 1789 with the convening of the Estates General, a general assembly representing the 3 estates of France: the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. Though meant to advise the king, the assembly quickly became a battleground of ideas, grievances, and revolutionary ambitions. The Third Estate, representing the common people, declared itself the National Assembly and took an oath to create a constitution that would limit the monarchy's power. In response, the court, including figures like Princess de Lamballe, who were closely aligned with the Queen, was increasingly viewed as resisting change, defending privilege, and obstructing progress. To many revolutionaries, those loyal to the monarchy were not merely courtiers, they were enemies of the people. As revolutionary fervor spread, Paris became a tinderbox of rage. The storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789, became the iconic symbol of popular resistance against royal authority, signaling that the populace was willing to use violence to achieve its goals. This event sent shockwaves throughout the aristocracy and the royal court. Princess de Lamballe, ever loyal to Marie Antoinette, remained at Versailles and Paris, steadfast in her service, even as the monarchy's authority began to crumble. Her dedication, once a mark of honor, now marked her for suspicion and danger. To the revolutionaries, loyalty to the Queen equated to complicity in the injustices that had provoked the masses. The Queen herself became a lightning rod for revolutionary anger, often unfairly vilified as the embodiment of corruption, extravagance, and indifference to the suffering of the poor. Marie Antoinette's Austrian heritage and her perceived foreign influence fueled xenophobic resentment. Pamphlets, cartoons, and scathing gossip spread throughout Paris, portraying her as a decadent villain whose closest associates, especially Princess de Lamballe, were equally guilty by association. De Lamballe's unwavering devotion to the Queen placed her in an increasingly perilous position. Her proximity to Marie Antoinette made her a visible target, a living symbol of the courtly excess and perceived moral corruption the revolutionaries loathed. By 1792, the political situation had grown increasingly radical. The monarchy was under siege, both physically and ideologically. The radical Jacobins, led by figures such as Maximilien Robespierre and Georges Danton, were gaining power, advocating for the execution of those deemed enemies of the revolution. Paris descended into a state of panic and violence. Revolutionary committees and citizen militias wielded immense power, often bypassing formal legal procedures entirely. Aristocrats were arrested on mere suspicion, imprisoned, or worse. The Reign of Terror, a period marked by widespread fear, mass executions, and mob violence, was imminent. Princess de Lamballe, as one of the most visible and loyal figures to the Queen, was increasingly endangered by this political maelstrom. The rise of revolutionary fury was not merely political, it was intensely personal and social. Anger toward the aristocracy was fueled by years of social inequality and perceived moral decay. Pamphleteers and propagandists painted figures like Princess de Lamballe in grotesque terms, portraying her as manipulative, corrupt, or complicit in imagined royal schemes. These attacks were amplified by Parisian crowds, whose rage could erupt unpredictably into mob violence. The line between political activism and social vendetta blurred, and any connection to the royal family became a potential death sentence. Public outrage intensified further as economic conditions worsened. Bread prices skyrocketed, unemployment soared, and starvation threatened the city's poorest residents. Revolutionary leaders capitalized on this despair, framing the monarchy and its associates as direct culprits for the suffering. Princess de Lamballe, by virtue of her closeness to the Queen, was implicated in this narrative. Her wealth, her noble status, and her public presence at court marked her as an emblem of everything the revolution sought to overthrow. For ordinary Parisians, she was not merely a person. They saw her as a symbol, a tangible representation of the system that had failed them. Amid this escalating hostility, the royal family attempted to navigate a rapidly shifting landscape. Efforts at compromise, dialogue, and reform were met with suspicion and derision. Marie Antoinette's attempts to preserve her dignity and maintain her household, including her reliance on loyal aides like Princess de Lamballe, were framed as arrogance and defiance. The Queen's inner circle, once a source of strength and guidance, became a liability. Princess de Lamballe, who had devoted her life to serving Marie Antoinette with discretion and loyalty, was now at the mercy of a revolutionary tide that cared little for nuance, mercy, or justice. By the summer of 1792, the danger to the Queen's confidants was undeniable. Revolutionary paranoia had reached fever pitch. Political radicals and mobs roamed the streets, arresting, interrogating, and executing those suspected of royalist sympathies. Prisons became overcrowded with nobles, clergy, and anyone deemed suspect. The atmosphere in Paris was suffused with terror. Rumors of plots, betrayals, and conspiracies spread rapidly, and the line between truth and propaganda was almost meaningless. Princess de Lamballe's presence in the capital, her status as a royal favorite, and her unwavering loyalty to Marie Antoinette all combi Ned to make her a prime target for revolutionary wrath. Yet, despite the danger, Princess de Lamballe remained resolute. She continued to serve the Queen, attending to her needs, offering counsel, and maintaining her household. Her courage and loyalty were extraordinary in the face of escalating violence and personal risk. She was acutely aware of the hatred surrounding her, yet she refused to abandon her post or her principles. This steadfastness, admirable as it was, positioned her directly in the path of the revolution's most extreme manifestations. The fury she had witnessed in the streets of Paris, the mobs, the executions, the frenzied cries for justice, was about to collide with her life in the most horrifying way imaginable. The rise of revolutionary fury, therefore, was not a distant political event. It was an unstoppable force that reshaped the very world Princess de Lamballe had known. It transformed streets into arenas of terror, neighborhoods into hunting grounds, and the social hierarchy into a dangerous liability. Her status, once a source of honor and influence, had become a mark of imminent danger. The revolution was no longer abstract. It was personal, immediate, and lethal. For Marie-Thérèse de Lamballe, the combination of her loyalty, her visibility, and the merciless rage of a revolutionary populace would soon culminate in one of the most notorious and brutal episodes of the Reign of Terror. The fury that had been simmering for decades had reached a boiling point, and Princess de Lamballe stood directly in its path. She had lived her life with honor, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty, yet these virtues could offer no protection against the forces that had been unleashed. The rise of revolutionary fury was both a social and political reckoning, a storm that would engulf the monarchy, its supporters, and ultimately Princess de Lamballe herself. The stage was set for her tragic end, one that would shock the nation and echo through history as a grim testament to the extremes of human anger and the peril of loyalty. In a time of chaos b. 1792, the city of Paris had become a cauldron of fear, suspicion, and violence. The revolution, which had begun as a call for reform and equality, had evolved into a chaotic struggle in which loyalty to the monarchy was tantamount to treason. Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise de Lamballe, the loyal confidante of Queen Marie Antoinette, had remained at the Queen's side throughout the mounting unrest, demonstrating steadfast devotion even as the streets erupted with cries for vengeance against the aristocracy. Her courage, however, would not protect her from the rapidly escalating fury of the revolutionary populace. The atmosphere of Paris at the time was one of near-constant paranoia. Rumors spread like wildfire through the city, often carrying little basis in fact, but a devastating weight of accusation. Aristocrats were accused of plotting against the revolution, of hoarding resources, or of betraying the people. Public opinion, inflamed by pamphlets, caricatures, and sensationalist journalism, demanded action against anyone remotely associated with the monarchy. Princess de Lamballe, by virtue of her proximity to Queen Marie Antoinette and her prominent role within the royal household, was a prime target. Her identity as a noblewoman and her unwavering loyalty to the Queen made her a symbol of the system that the revolution sought to dismantle. Her arrest was a predictable consequence of this climate. In August 1792, following the insurrection of the Tuileries Palace, revolutionary forces swept through Paris, targeting royal supporters with systematic precision. The princess, along with many other high-ranking courtiers, was apprehended and taken to La Force prison, a building that would soon become infamous for its overcrowded cells, harsh conditions, and the terror that permeated its walls. La Force, a former noble residence converted into a prison, was a place where fear, disease, and the threat of sudden execution combined to create an environment of constant psychological torment. The conditions of imprisonment were nightmarish. Prisoners were crammed into dark, damp cells with little ventilation or light. The stench of human waste and decay permeated the corridors, creating an atmosphere of despair and degradation. Disease spread rapidly, with typhus, smallpox, and dysentery claiming countless victims. Food was scarce, often limited to moldy bread and thin soup, and water was contaminated and difficult to obtain. Guards were often hostile, motivated either by revolutionary zeal or personal resentment toward the aristocracy. For Princess de Lamballe, who had lived a life of refinement, comfort, and privilege, the sudden descent into this grim reality must have been a profound shock, though historical accounts suggest that she endured these hardships with remarkable composure. The psychological torment of imprisonment was perhaps even more acute than the physical discomfort. In La Force, prisoners were isolated from their families, stripped of their possessions, and subjected to constant fear of sudden arrest or execution. The atmosphere was one of mistrust and paranoia. Fellow inmates, driven by desperation, could turn on one another, while the omnipresent threat of revolutionary tribunals loomed over every moment. For Princess de Lamballe, the knowledge that her loyalty to the Queen made her a marked woman must have been a source of immense anxiety. Every noise in the prison, shouts, footsteps, or cries from neighboring cells, carried the possibility of violence or death. Her treatment at La Force also reflected the revolutionary intent to humiliate and punish as much as to incarcerate. Accounts suggest that Princess de Lamballe, along with other imprisoned aristocrats, was often subjected to insults, intimidation, and physical abuse from both guards and fellow revolutionaries. She was forced to witness the brutal conditions endured by her fellow prisoners, many of whom were tortured or executed with shocking swiftness. The prison became a microcosm of the revolution itself, a place where human dignity was eroded, where fear was a constant companion, and where violence could erupt at any moment. Despite the peril, Princess de Lamballe's conduct remained consistent with her character. Historical testimonies describe her as maintaining dignity, compassion, and courage throughout her imprisonment. She reportedly offered comfort to fellow prisoners, shared her meager rations, and acted as a stabilizing presence amid chaos. Her behavior reflected the same loyalty and moral fortitude that had defined her service to the Queen. Yet, in the eyes of the revolutionary authorities and the increasingly radical mobs outside, her composure and unwavering loyalty were not virtues. They were evidence of guilt, defiance, and complicity with the monarchy. The political dynamics within La Force prison were also complex and dangerous. Revolutionary committees frequently interrogated prisoners, demanding confessions or accusations against fellow aristocrats. Refusal to cooperate often resulted in harsher treatment or immediate execution. Princess de Lamballe, whose conscience and loyalty prevented her from betraying others, faced an impossible choice. Her silence and steadfastness were acts of courage, but also further sealed her fate. In the charged atmosphere of revolutionary Paris, moderation, reason, or mercy held little sway against the surge of public fury and the radicalism of the Jacobin leaders during her emprise. En Ment, the streets of Paris were becoming ever more violent. Revolutionary mobs roamed freely, executing anyone perceived as an enemy of the revolution. Public spectacles of violence, including the infamous September massacres, were becoming routine. The massacres involved mobs storming prisons, brutally murdering inmates in acts of collective vengeance. These massacres were often justified under the guise of preemptive justice. Aristocrats and priests were accused of plotting with foreign powers or of threatening the revolution's survival. Princess de Lamballe's name, closely tied to Marie Antoinette, placed her directly in the path of such retribution. Her arrest, then, was not merely the seizure of an individual, it was a symbolic act. By detaining one of the Queen's closest allies, the revolutionaries sent a message to the monarchy and the aristocracy: no one was safe. It was a demonstration of power, intended to erode morale and enforce compliance through fear. For Princess de Lamballe, the personal consequences of this political statement were catastrophic. Her days in La Force were marked not only by deprivation and terror, but by the knowledge that the mob outside would soon decide her fate. Historical accounts suggest that, even in these dire circumstances, Princess de Lamballe remained resolute. She reportedly maintained her faith, her composure, and her dignity, offering solace to others even as her own life hung in the balance. This steadfastness, however, could not shield her from the escalating violence. The revolutionary authorities and the frenzied Parisian mobs were no longer interested in justice or due process. They sought vengeance, spectacle, and the public affirmation of power. In this climate, imprisonment was little more than a prelude to death, a grim holding period before the inevitable culmination of revolutionary fury. Princess de Lamballe. Time in La Force thus serves as a chilling illustration of the reign of terror's human cost. The conditions, both physical and psychological, were designed to break the spirit of prisoners, to strip away their dignity, and to prepare them for public punishment. Yet, the princess's courage and moral fortitude stood in stark contrast to the cruelty around her, highlighting the human dimension of the tragedy. Her imprisonment was not merely a stage in her personal story, it was emblematic of the broader collapse of justice, civility, and humanity in revolutionary Paris. In sum, Princess de Lamballe's arrest and imprisonment marked a descent from privilege into unimaginable terror. From the refined halls of Versailles to the overcrowded, disease-ridden cells of La Force, she experienced a world transformed by fear, hatred, and political upheaval. Her dignity, loyalty, and courage remained intact, even as the mechanisms of revolutionary vengeance closed in around her. The imprisonment of Princess de Lamballe was a cruel prelude to the horrors that awaited her, demonstrating the lethal consequences of unwavering loyalty in a society consumed by paranoia, rage, and revolutionary fervor. It set the stage for a brutal end that would shock contemporaries and historians alike, leaving a legacy of horror that still resonates today. The imprisonment of Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise de Lamballe was only a prelude to a fate that would shock even the hardened observers of the French Revolution. By August 1792, the reign of terror was accelerating, and the city of Paris had become a cauldron of fear, violence, and unchecked vengeance. Revolutionary mobs roamed the streets, their fury directed at anyone associated with the monarchy, particularly those closest to Queen Marie Antoinette. Princess de Lamballe, as the Queen's confidante and a prominent noblewoman, was a conspicuous target. 8. A symbol of royal privilege, and in the eyes of the revolutionaries, a legitimate object of public rage. Her capture and incarceration had already stripped her of the trappings of her former life, the elegance, comfort, and dignity that had defined her years at court, but it could not shield her from the extremes of human cruelty that awaited. On August 3, 1792, her life took a horrific turn when a mob stormed La Force prison. Revolutionary Paris, inflamed by months of propaganda, economic hardship, and political radicalism, was in a state of frenzy. Mobs claimed to act in the name of justice, yet their actions were motivated by a combination of fear, hatred, and the desire for spectacle. For Princess de Lamballe, there was no escape. The crowd outside demanded a spectacle, and her high status made her the ideal victim. The exact sequence of events remains both tragic and shocking. Historical accounts suggest that the mob dragged her from her cell with violence, paying no heed to her cries, pleas, or protests. The streets of Paris, usually teeming with daily commerce, had transformed into a theater of terror. Crowds jeered and screamed, their faces twisted with rage and anticipation, eager to witness the downfall of someone so closely associated with the Queen. For Princess de Lamballe, the world she had known, the serene gardens, the polished halls of Versailles, the intimate confidences of the Queen, had vanished, replaced by the chaos of a city consumed by revolutionary fervor. Once in the hands of the mob, the brutality escalated beyond mere execution. Princess de Lamballe was reportedly beaten and tortured in the streets, Witnesses later described scenes of unspeakable cruelty. Her captors showed no restraint, and their violence appeared both personal and performative, a twisted demonstration of power. The princess, known for her courage and composure, faced Heisei attacks with a dignity that, by all accounts, only intensified the mob's fury. Her suffering became a public spectacle, a horrifying affirmation of the revolution's capacity for cruelty. The mob's actions went beyond the physical, they were profoundly symbolic. Princess de Lamballe, as the Queen's intimate friend, represented the monarchy itself. To attack her was to attack Marie Antoinette vicariously, to strike at the heart of the royal household. The cruelty inflicted upon her was not merely punitive, it was performative, designed to terrorize other aristocrats, to demonstrate the power of the revolutionary people, and to satisfy a public appetite for vengeance. In this sense, her execution became a grotesque theater of politics, where brutality was both spectacle and statement. Reports of the treatment Princess de Lamballe endured are almost unimaginable. Eyewitness accounts suggest that she was mutilated by the mob in acts of extreme violence, her body desecrated as a form of intimidation and retribution. Revolutionary Paris, at this moment, was a city where human life, particularly that of aristocrats and royalists, had become expendable in the pursuit of political spectacle. It was a place where fury had replaced justice, where public vengeance was celebrated, and where even the most loyal and innocent individuals could fall victim to the collective rage. In addition to the physical torment, the psychological horror of her execution was immense. Princess de Lamballe, who had lived a life guided by loyalty, faith, and moral principle, faced the knowledge that she would die not by law or tribunal, but by mob violence. There was no due process, no opportunity for defense, and no appeal. Her death was to be a public statement, carried out in full view of her captors and the onlookers who had gathered for this grim spectacle. The terror of such an experience, the anticipation, the helplessness, the knowledge that no one would intervene, added a layer of suffering that no physical injury alone could convey. The culmination of this violence was her beheading, a grim echo of the executions that were soon to become routine under the Reign of Terror. Unlike the methodical and regulated executions that would later define the guillotine era, Princess de Lamballe's death was chaotic, brutal, and sensationalized. Her head, according to contemporary accounts, was carried on a pike through the streets of Paris as a warning to those who remained loyal to the monarchy. Crowds jeered and cheered, and her dismembered body was treated as an object of public display, stripped of dignity and humanity. This grotesque finale symbolized the revolution's willingness to obliterate not only life but identity and honor in the pursuit of vengeance. The execution of Princess de Lamballe became a defining moment in the narrative of revolutionary Paris. For contemporaries, it was both shocking and emblematic, illustrating the extremes to which mob justice could descend when fueled by political passion, social resentment, and moral outrage. For historians, it remains a stark reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria, ideological fanaticism, and the dehumanizing effect of unchecked political power. The brutal treatment she endured underscores the fragility of human dignity in times of social upheaval, particularly for those caught in positions of visibility and symbolic importance. Princess de Lamballe's death also highlights the personal tragedy of loyalty in a revolutionary age. Her life had been defined by dedication to Marie Antoinette, a relationship rooted in trust, friendship, and moral commitment. Yet, in revolutionary Paris, such loyalty became a liability, a justification for extreme violence. Her execution illustrates the cruel irony of the revolution. Virtues such as fidelity, courage, and integrity, which had once been celebrated in aristocratic circles, were recast as crimes in the eyes of the revolutionary mob. The princess's demise was not merely a political statement, it was the obliteration of a human being whose character and values rendered her incapable, acting in ways that might have ensured her survival. Even as the violence of her execution shocked the public, it also inspired a complex legacy of memory and symbolism. For royalists and sympathizers, Princess de Lamballe became a martyr, a symbol of loyalty and moral courage. destroyed by the barbarity of revolutionary justice. Artists, writers, and chroniclers of the period depicted her as an innocent victim, emphasizing the cruelty and inhumanity of her death. For revolutionaries, her execution was intended as a warning, a demonstration of the consequences of opposing the people's will. In this way, her death occupied a dual role in the historical imagination, both as cautionary tale and as emblem of suffering at the hands of collective fury. The horror of Princess de Lamballe's execution also resonates on a deeply human level. Beyond politics, ideology, and symbolism, it represents the ultimate vulnerability of the individual in the face of mass violence. A woman who had dedicated her life to friendship, service, and loyalty was subjected to a fate so grotesque and public that it challenges comprehension. The meticulousness of her loyalty, the refinement of her character, and the courage she displayed throughout imprisonment could not shield her from the mob's wrath. Her suffering exemplifies the indiscriminate nature of revolutionary violence and the human cost of political upheaval when mercy, justice, and humanity are abandoned. In conclusion, the execution of Princess de Lamballe was not merely a violent event, it was a complex and horrifying intersection of political symbolism, social fury, and human cruelty. Her death, marked by torture, public display, and the ultimate desecration of her body, stands as one of the most infamous episodes of the Reign of Terror. It highlights the deadly consequences of loyalty in times of radical change, and serves as a healing reminder that even virtues such as courage, fidelity, and moral integrity may be powerless against the momentum of mass hatred and ideological fanaticism. The brutality of her final hours ensured that her name would endure not merely as a historical footnote, but as a haunting emblem of the revolution's darkest excesses. The brutal execution of Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise de Lamballe left a scar not only on the memory of the French monarchy but also on the collective consciousness of France and the wider world. While her death was one of many atrocities during the Reign of Terror, the extraordinary violence and symbolism surrounding it elevated her story into a cautionary tale of loyalty, devotion, and the indiscriminate cruelty of revolutionary fervor. Her legacy, both tragic and symbolic, continues to resonate through history, literature, and cultural memory as a stark reminder of the human cost of political extremism. Immediately following her death, the reactions were varied and deeply emotional. Among royalists and sympathizers, Princess de Lamballe was mourned as a martyr. Her unwavering loyalty to Queen Marie Antoinette, even in the face of imminent danger, became a defining characteristic in the retelling of her life. She was celebrated as the epitome of courage and fidelity, someone who adhered to her principles even as the world around her descended into chaos. In an era when loyalty could be a death sentence, her example stood as a moral lesson, emphasizing the virtues of steadfastness and personal honor. Many saw her death not as a consequence of her own actions, but as the result of a society unhinged by anger, fear, and ideology. The story of her execution also played a significant role in shaping contemporary perceptions of the Reign of Terror. Historians, chroniclers, and eyewitnesses emphasized the extreme brutality she endured, highlighting the degradation and public spectacle of her death. In this way, her story became a touchstone for understanding the excesses of revolutionary justice. Unlike some victims of the revolution who died quietly, de Lamballe's murder was public, gruesome, and shocking, a visceral demonstration of how quickly the veneer of civilization could collapse under political and social pressure. Her death underscored the human cost of mob justice and the vulnerability of individuals caught in the tides of historical upheaval. Culturally, Princess de Lamballe's memory endured through art, literature, and historical narrative. Writers of the 19th century, particularly those sympathetic to the monarchy, depicted her as an innocent victim of an irrational and vengeful society. She was often portrayed as the tragic friend of the Queen, a woman whose loyalty and courage could not save her from the consequences of political terror. Paintings and sketches of her death dramatized the horror and underscored her martyrdom, contributing to a lasting image of nobility crushed by the machinery of revolution. These depictions served both as historical record and as moral commentary, reinforcing the dangers of unbridled popular rage and ideological extremism. Her story also became intertwined with the narrative of Queen Marie Antoinette. The princess's fate was often recounted in tandem with the queen's own eventual execution, emphasizing the intimate human cost of the revolution on those closest to the monarchy. This connection reinforced the perception of the queen as both victim and tragic figure, surrounded by loyal supporters who paid the ultimate price for their fidelity. In many ways, Princess de Lamballe's death humanized the monarchy's inner circle, moving beyond abstract notions of privilege or corruption and highlighting the individual suffering inflicted by political upheaval. The legacy of terror that Princess de Lamballe came to symbolize extends beyond France and the revolution itself. Her story has been referenced in discussions of loyalty, courage, and the ethics of political violence. Philosophers and historians have used her experience as a case study in the dangers of collective judgment, illustrating how fear, propaganda, and ideological zeal can lead to acts of extreme cruelty. Her life and death raise questions that remain relevant today. What happens when loyalty becomes a liability? How does society balance justice with compassion in times of crisis? And, perhaps most hauntingly, what becomes of individuals who stand by their principles in an age defined by fury and retribution? The princess's death also had immediate psychological and social effects on those still within the royal household. Her murder, carried out with such barbarity, instilled fear in the remaining supporters of Marie Antoinette, further isolating the queen and undermining morale. The message of terror was unmistakable. Loyalty to the monarchy could and would be punished with extreme violence. This psychological warfare was part of a larger revolutionary strategy, using fear and spectacle to consolidate power and intimidate potential dissenters. Princess de Lamballe's execution, therefore, was not simply an act of vengeance but a calculated demonstration of the revolution's capacity for terror. Yet even amidst the horror, her example inspired admiration for human courage and steadfastness. Witnesses and historians often note that despite the cruelty she endured, de Lamballe displayed remarkable composure, grace, and dignity. She maintained her sense of self, her faith, and her loyalty to the very end. This moral and personal fortitude has been remembered as one of the most compelling aspects of her legacy, illustrating that even in the most extreme circumstances, human dignity can endure. Her resilience has made her a figure of historical fascination and a symbol of the profound human cost of ideological extremism. The princess's legacy also extends into the broader narrative of memory and myth surrounding the French Revolution. Over time, her story has been adapted, dramatized, and memorialized in ways that reflect both historical fact and cultural interpretation. She is frequently depicted as the innocent and loyal victim, a foil to the revolutionary chaos that consumed Paris. In literature and popular culture, her figure has become emblematic of the human tragedies that occur when social and political systems collapse, emphasizing the danger of dehumanizing ideological zeal and the vulnerability of individuals caught in historical upheaval. Moreover, Princess de Lamballe's story serves as a cautionary reminder of the fragility of social order and the consequences of unchecked power. Her life, once defined by privilege and influence, ended in the most public and violent manner imaginable, demonstrating how quickly societal norms can erode in the face of fear and hatred. For historians, her execution offers a lens through which to examine the dynamics of mob violence, the psychology of revolutionary terror, and the moral complexities of loyalty in times of extreme crisis. Her death is a testament to the human capacity for both cruelty and courage, highlighting the duality that defines periods of political upheaval. Finally, the legacy of Princess de Lamballe underscores the enduring tension between memory and history. While the revolution sought to erase the old order, stories of her loyalty, courage, and tragic death ensured that she could not be forgotten. Her life and death became a moral touchstone, reminding successive generations of the costs of political fanaticism, the dangers of mass hysteria, and the importance of protecting human dignity even amid social transformation. In this way, she remains not just a historical figure but a symbol, a reminder that behind the statistics of revolution, the lives, virtues, and tragedies of individuals continue to resonate, shaping our understanding of courage, loyalty, and the human consequences of terror. In summary, the legacy of Princess Marie-Thérèse Louise de Lamballe is profound and multifaceted. She stands as a symbol of loyalty and moral courage destroyed by political violence, a human being whose life and death illuminate the extremes of revolutionary France. Her story has been preserved through history, art, literature, and collective memory, ensuring that the horror she endured is never forgotten. Beyond her death lies a powerful lesson about the human cost of ideological extremism, the vulnerability of virtue in times of chaos, and the enduring power of a loyalty and dignity even in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Princess de Lamballe's memory continues to serve as a warning, a tribute, and a reminder of both the darkness and resilience of the human spirit.